Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Let Her Boss. We have some fun things to talk about today, but first off, we're going to start with our How It Started story, and Liana has a great story for us this morning.
Well, it is so good to see you, Lucinda. You know, it's so exciting to be back. We've had some good guests, and that's been so fun.
Yes.
Getting to know these different
Hearing
entrepreneurs.
all these new stories that I haven't heard before, and I love getting inspired by everyone that in different industries, not just real estate.
Yeah, because I think there's such a core at the beginning that makes people succeed. And I want to talk today about Sarah Blakely. She was the creator of Spanx.
Oh.
Yes. And I just thought I found her to be so interesting because one of the things sometimes I think we look at entrepreneurs who are really successful and we feel like they just poof, they got there and we don't know the work that was behind it. And I just think her story is kind of interesting. So I had seen her on a TV show once and she was talking about her dad and how they would sit down to dinner and her dad would always ask her, "So tell me, what did you fail at today?"
Oh. That's a great way to start a dinner conversation.
Isn't it? Not what you would think. And then if you didn't fail at anything that day, he would say, "Oh, bummer. No opportunity to learn something new."
Oh.
Isn't that so funny? I loved that. And I was like, that's such a concept. So that's what she was raised with, which I think really kind of gave her that impetus to try things. So she actually started this business on $5,000.
Oh.
And she didn't even get any other investors to do it. But it started out that she wanted to wear something. She would always wear her pantyhose under her pants and stuff because it made it look so much slimmer and kind of would hold you in. But then she would cut the toes out of her hose because she didn't want to have the feet in them. And so she kept calling every lingerie company, producer, "Hey, you guys, I really have this great idea. I think you should do this." No one. They were like, "Oh, you're crazy, lady. No, that's never going to fly, ma'am." And she just got rejection after rejection. And then finally she said, "Okay, universe, give me a sign." And she turns around and turns on the TV, and there's Oprah Winfrey talking about how she wears her hose under her pants and cuts her feet out. And she went, boom.
If Oprah has a good idea, then it must be a good idea.
Agreed. You couldn't have heard it from anyone better. So that's what she did. And then she took her $5,000 out of her bank account, and she started this project. And it was try after try after try. And then when she finally got it into like the Neiman Marcus and some of the higher end department stores, which was a feat in itself, she was kind of put in that back corner where the lingerie is, where nobody else is maybe going to see you. She was like, what's going to happen to my sales? And so she spent her time going around every store she was in. She met every counter person, the makeup person, the janitor, everybody. And she would tell them about it. She would give them trial things. And then eventually she even put tables like up at the front of the store, and Neiman Marcus is really particular.
Oh, yeah.
And so people would come up to her and they would say, "Oh, do you have permission to do that?" And she would say, "Yeah, oh, absolutely." And nobody knew, oh, well, somebody must have given her permission. So she got away with it. By the time they realized no one had given her permission, her sales were so high, they said, let that woman just keep doing what she's doing.
That's such a great story. I had not heard that's how she started out. And what I love about that story is a lot of folks think they need big investors, or they have to get on Shark Tank, or they have to have a lot of money to start. But maybe you need more than $5,000 to produce a line now. But that's pretty incredible that she got into the departments, got into Neiman Marcus, and took it that far. So, and I appreciate it because I'm wearing Spanx today. So. They're an amazing invention. And I used to put my pantyhose under my pants, too.
She was on to something.
So she was on to something. So it's very good. You never know where an idea is born. So I think that's an awesome thing to remember. Like when you have an idea, you just have to have that oomph to take it to the next, no turning back. So, and that's what I want to talk about today. That point, we talk about the tipping point of your business of like when you take success and we were talking a lot about it in the business planning and our last 90-day planning for the year with our agents and with other folks out there that they're coming to the end of the year and what's next. And a lot of people are really excited, the first week after a plan, just like, when you join a gym, you go for a couple weeks and then it winds down. And what can you do to keep that renewed commitment constantly going? The other thing is I'm finding some are really pushing forward with their 90-day plan because they're in a place of desperation.
Yep.
Like they don't have the sales to pay their bills next month, so now they're doing all the stuff. But if they had done it, 45 days, 60 days before, we wouldn't be in this place. So trying to save that entrepreneur from getting to that place where they're desperate.
Yep.
And getting that consistency and keeping it going consistent. So I had a story I heard years and years ago, actually, Tony Robbins tell it from the stage, which was like really eye-opening, powerful. And I was like, is this even a true story? But so I looked it up and sounds like it's factual. But whether it's not or not a true part of history, I know I'll get chastised if it's a made up story, but I think it's a great story. And have you ever heard about the story of a conqueror back like in the 1500s, and him and his crew decide they're going to take this untakeable treasure from an island.
The Cortez
Cortez
story. Okay. I do think it's true, actually.
I do think it is too. When I researched it, it looks like a true story. It's just so long ago. There's not a ton of facts to verify everything. But so the story goes, and my Reader's Digest version of it is Cortez was a conqueror, and this treasure had been untakeable for like 600 years. Different conquerors had tried to take it, or I don't want to say pirates, but anyway, different people had tried to take this island and take their treasure, and they had too big of an army and to defend it, and they never could. So he sets out and he figures he has the best army, like 500 men are going to join him, and he hypes them all up and he tells them what their life's going to be like if they get this treasure and how their lives are going to change, and they're all focused on their goal and their vision like we do with the agents. What's your why? So their why is what their life's going to be like after they get it. So they're excited and they set off to sail to the island, and halfway through they're kind of losing their oomph. They're not as excited anymore. It's like, this is really hard. It's cold. It's rainy. There's storms. Do we really want this? Can we just go back home? So he knows that it's going to take more than just that why to keep them going. They're going to get there, and then they've got to find that renewed energy that's going to make them fight till they get that treasure, or else, they're going to go home empty-handed. So he gets to the island, and they gather around, and usually that's when, like the general gives the plan, and they all think they're going to get this plan to go take it, and we're going to go here and fight and meet back here. And he just says, burn the ships, burn the boats, to all his men. And they look at him like, what are you talking about? He said, burn the boats. And he said, because if we're going home in their boats. So I want you to burn our boats, because then they have no choice but to win. They have it's either do it or die. There's no way out. And we can't really do that necessarily to our agents. I'm like, if you don't make your calls, you're going to die. But the mental burning of your boats, usually what's stopping us is that the only time where we do stay consistent is when there's desperation there. Yeah. But I want to find a way to channel that without having to actually truly give them the life or death, desperation of completing the task. And certainly we're not fighting an army, but in a sense we are. You're fighting for your dream. You're fighting for what your life would be like after that. And they did burn the boats, and they did take the treasure, and they took the island because they had no turning back. And I think with an entrepreneur, and when I told that story to our agents, there was several folks that stepped, and said, hey, my boats were this, right. Or I had no choice, or I had no turning back. And that the ones I see that are the most successful, they continued because they didn't give themselves an out. Like I love Sylvester Stallone's story, how he relentlessly, he lost his wife, he lost his down to selling his dog to be successful. Do you ever hear that? So
I did not
that
know
maybe that
he
might
sold
be-
his
Oh
dog.
yeah, he did.
Painful.
Yes. But he did. That was a funny story, but that's probably a longer story for another episode. But I'll
Love it.
find that one and share with you. It takes that commitment to make to success, and just like her story this morning, she got rejected and rejected and rejected, and she probably could have gotten in a lot of trouble having her table at Neiman Marcus, right? And if she let fear get in her way, she never would have had that success.
Right? Or if you don't, if you just believe what everybody says, that's a bad idea, it's never going to happen. She could have been done at that. She had a great career. It wasn't like she was homeless or trying to figure out how to make a living. She wasn't desperate. So there is the ability when you don't give yourself that out, right? And it's so interesting and it is so hard. You don't want to say, okay, everybody go out and burn your Beamer.
Yeah.
Just go burn that Beamer. Hitchhike to where you're going. Get yourself to that desperate position so you don't give up. And it really is a mindset so that we don't have to get in a position where we're absolutely desperate or up against a wall to keep moving forward. So I do agree. It really is a mental boat we've got to burn.
Well, it's that plan B in the back of your mind always. And I know when I mentally made that decision, I don't have a plan B. And that's when I really started to grow because there was just no turning back. I'm not going to go get another job. And in our industry, that's a lot of the fallback. I'll just go back to my old job. I'll just go get another job. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they start out with a career and an idea, and they kind of trying to serve two masters at that same time, take their idea to be successful, but they've still got that career in the background that's paying the bills. And I think to really move forward with great success, a lot of times you just have to cut that off. Like you have to give yourself that desperation point to move forward. And we had a guest on a couple of weeks ago that told a similar story, and she'd said she saw the bumper sticker that, said, let go, there's net to catch you. And she had to she just let go of her other job and went full force into her new idea. And that's really hard.
Yes.
To step out in faith, but sometimes it takes that commitment and it takes that risk of investment into it.
Agreed. And I think it also shows you really need both feet in.
Yeah.
Right. And that's sometimes we straddle if we're in a comfortable enough position, but feel we would want to go that way, but aren't sure. And then you're straddling and you're never fully in either direction. And that's just painful because I think it just takes both of those roads a very long and slow and maybe dead end.
Well, and I know that Tom always says, are you interested? Are you committed? And so I think when we talked about, okay, how to start a business or how to pursue being an entrepreneur. And, it starts with that idea of whatever it is that you want to create or an interest maybe. But then you have to say, am I interested in that or am I committed to that? Is this just, I kind of like running a restaurant or I'm going to run a restaurant? I kind of like the idea of being a real estate agent. It sounds fun to show houses. Or do I want to make a career out of this and commit to it and feed my family by selling homes? And that's what separates, I think, a true entrepreneur from somebody that just wants to dabble in something. And I know there's probably thousands of stories out there of those that have taken that risk in the businesses that started in the garage and in the basement, and then now, they're millionaires. But what I've found when you kind of scratch around, it's that they were 100% committed to their idea.
Absolutely. They burned the boat.
Yeah.
They decided, I am not going to keep one foot over here. And sometimes that means then doing things different. That means that if you're going to do it 100%, maybe that means planning. That means maybe you have some kind of a financial net to help you through those starting times or something, but making that straddle and not making that commitment is just painful.
Yeah. It'll just keep you not being able to complete to that next side. Yeah. I wonder though, like there's some great stories about how people started, but to keep that continued growth. And I love to dig into stories like her with Spanx, like she got that growth, but then that next growth step, because growing's painful. Like growing a company, like they always, say it's growing pains. I mean, I went through that as I grew the company, and then you take it from a small thing. Like she must have had to find new manufacturers and go to the next. So there's going to be those steps all the way along the road, but you keep having pain even after you get your success.
Yes, that's that commitment for
Yeah.
a lifetime. It's like the working out,
Yeah.
or the eating healthy,
Because
the
what made her say,
changes.
"Oh, I'm making 10,000 a month. Is that enough, or am I going to take this to a multi-billion corporation?" What makes you decide to keep going forward with those painful growth steps? It's got to be that holding on to that commitment, because we could all just, when we get some success, we could just say, "Okay, this is good enough."
Yeah.
But that desire in there to keep growing and letting go to the next step, to have this huge, which a lot of times they then go sell on to a corporation that takes over for them, and they go retire or go invest in something else. I think true entrepreneurs, though, have a lot of hard time selling and not starting something new.
Yes. And I think it's not just going leveling up, but it's also being able to continue to keep going when you hit wall after wall after wall. I remember hearing her story. She said for 2 years she was committed to, she did a tour, I think it was a 30-day tour on the West Coast, to all of the department stores, and she would hit one day, and then she would meet everybody in that thing. She would introduce herself, like I said, to everybody, and then the next day she'd get in the car and she'd go on to the next place. She didn't even know where she was going, and then she'd go in and she'd do the same thing over again. And so for 2 years it was an everyday thing. It was not an easy road up, and so it's total commitment.
Yeah. You have to be willing to keep having struggles and pain along the way. Like I'm sure there was, even after they took the treasure, it wasn't all, they had to figure out how to get home.
Yes.
And I'm sure they lost a lot of men in their battle. And so there was loss and sacrifice along the way to get to that goal, where I'm sure she had loss and sacrifice along the way. I've found, relationships were the hardest thing when you start hitting those success points. Those are hard to hold on to. The time and commitment you have to put into building your business, you sacrifice a lot of fun times and things that you could, be spending with your family, time that you would be normally, maybe even self-care. Like a lot of entrepreneurs have to sacrifice their own time for a while to get to that growth place. And then once you have some of that success, start rebuilding that back. And I think I'd love to kind of walk through that process, over the next couple of months as we interview different people, and what's the next step after you start getting some success and you start getting those sales, or you start, your business starts growing and you can hire employees. Then how do you go back and refill up your cup, and with the relationships that you've neglected, with your health that maybe you've neglected, with time, like enjoying your success? Because that's one thing I see a lot of successful agents and entrepreneurs is they lose their life in that process of gaining success. And what does that balance look like afterwards?
That is such an important topic to reach, because I don't think we talk often enough about it. And that burnout is real,
Well, and when you grow a business too, you suddenly have all kinds of new things. Like she had a great idea with the pantyhose. Now she wanted them to fit and manufacture them, but then you gotta, how do you bulk order? How do you do the balances and taxes and become a corporation and all the new things that you have to learn? It's so much more than just doing the work every day, that you have to either help get the right people in place. But when you're small and starting out, I'm sure she couldn't hire a CEO to figure all that out for her. She had to figure all that out herself. So steps of like putting some of those things in place, and then how do you go back, and once you start having success in delegating that. We're in that process right now, aren't we, Leon? With me. Like with Growth Cubs, that I can't be everything in the company anymore. I can't run all the positions. I have to find people more talented than me that specialize in those areas to help continue on in that growth, so that I can, one, have some life and sanity back, but two, provide a better product and service. Because though we might have did a good job at the time getting it started, we're not experts in accounting, right? We're not experts in marketing. And so you go hire talented people in that field to take on that position as your company grows.
And that's honestly a whole nother skill set. Talk about those levels that you have to keep kind of moving up, doing that and then turning over and trusting something that you've spent so much of your life and energy building is a whole new set of skills. So that's another thing too, is I think that it's a constant learning, and you have to always remember your why. And it's the same thing. I think you're right. It's kind of painful as your success evolves. Sometimes those friendships change. It's not that there's not love there. It's just sometimes that we are really what we surround ourselves with. And I think sometimes that can be something that keeps us from moving forward, is that fear of letting go of that we love and are comfortable with, and trusting that there's going to be something new at that next place for
It
us.
is. Your mindset changes. But that's a good thing. Then I think that's what we're talking about with the mental burning of the boats, is that you kind of have to go to a place. And I think the one that told the story even said, when you make that shift and you make that commitment, a lot of people are going to criticize the things that you have to give up and the things that you're doing. And they're like, why are you so crazy? I remember Brendan Bouchard said that. He's like, people always told him, like, why are you going to be so crazy? Like, he was relentlessly pursuing his goal, and he was like obsessed with it. And then he always said, if people aren't calling you crazy, you're not living to the outer limits of your potential. Because he said,
I love that.
when you're really living to the potential of what's inside you to become, it's going to be like you're crazy, because you're going to be so committed to that you're going to be disciplined, and you're going to, when that distractor comes, I watch kind of all the years of being in a real estate office, you have the wonderful title reps and lenders that pop in with treats, and they want to take you to lunch and coffee, and you have to go, I really want to go have lunch and coffee or cocktail hour, but I'm not, because I'm going to focus on my time blocking or my prospecting or my marketing or whatever it is that you have designated that time to, because you don't have a boss standing over you saying you can't get off until 5, so you've got to finish these reports. You are your own boss. And so it takes a different mindset to say, I'm going to sacrifice some of those fun things, which I know in our industry, it's really hard, because we have those personality types that want to go socialize and have fun and do those things, and that's their innermost desires, but it's not always what they need in their business. So
Yep.
they have to make those choices of what's important.
And I think you have to be able to be alone. I think being alone is sometimes scary, because we kind of have been conditioned to live for the response from others, the validation from somebody else who says you're doing a good job, or you're staying in your lane and you're just where you should be. And then when you start going outside of that, and that makes other people uncomfortable, so you have to make a choice. Am I going to go towards my true self? Which may mean being lonely. It may mean that other people are telling you you're crazy, you're nuts, but you have to keep believing. And those are the times that if you hold on and you don't give up, then you find that new group of friends, the other people that say, fantastic that you did that. How amazing that you did that. That's such a breath of fresh air. But don't stop. That's the part. I think they even say when you're doing phone calls and you're trying to reach somebody, that most people will stop the call before the winning. They will go, 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 and then they'll stop making those phone calls, and it was the next one they would have possibly picked up.
Well, and I love that you say that you have to be okay being alone. And I feel like, we really try to make sure our agents and entrepreneurs aren't feeling alone in it. But it's sometimes you are a little bit alone. And there are some of our agents that we are the only ones that they can reach out to in the evening or at night for a question, because their colleagues are not as committed to where they're at. So maybe the friends they hang out with at the office are not going to be the friends that are going to be doing the work with them. And I had a good friend that she lives in another state, and I was running 100 miles a month. That was my goal, and I would set a new goal at the end of the month, and I got bone spurs. Obviously, I've not been running 100 miles a month right now, but I want to get back to that. But she said, I want to do it. But she said, I have no running partner. And I said, well, I don't have a running partner. I said, I just get up and go. I have friends that run other places that will help encourage me, but they can't actually come and run with me. And I said, you have to, if you want this, you have to be willing to just do it alone. Like,
Absolutely.
You have to be willing. You can't wait for somebody else to want to do it with you. And that was for me too. It's like when I made the decision to buy the company instead of be an agent at the company, my friends were agents at the company. And when they were done at the end of the day, I was not done at the end of the day. I had to stay and work. And it wasn't fun. It was kind of like your friends when you were a kid, and some of them didn't get their homework done as fast as you, and then you couldn't go play because they couldn't go play because their homework wasn't done. And so they were kind of mad at me, like, why do you got to be like this? Why do you got to stay so late? Why do you have to work tonight? Because nobody else was here to do it, because I was it was just me. I didn't even have an employee. So it's like I had to stay and do books at night because during the day I sold.
Right.
And then now I got to stay up late and balance so I can write your checks. It was that kind of commitment that entrepreneurs sometimes have to make that your friends don't understand.
Yeah.
And I think, agents have to realize that too. You don't always have a buddy that's going to go do the work with you. You have to make that commitment to go do it. And sometimes you have to stay late. And
and I think that also brings up the point that I think sometimes that's where those networking events or the groups of entrepreneurs where you can go around and get to those people that are doing the same thing you do. Again, it kind of helps you not feel so alone in the game, and you can get maybe a little motivation and a little support from those people. So I think when you are making this shift, or you do decide to jump in with both feet, know your support system, or know where you can go meet like-minded people, whether it's an entrepreneurial meetup or networking events. I know there's women in networking, various different events that have a lot of entrepreneurs, and you might find some solace.
Chamber's always really good. I know our guest a few weeks ago, she said she loved the conferences. I love conferences. I'm a conference junkie. But that's because you get to go surround yourself with like-minded people.
Yes.
And you go find those new stories that motivate you, even if it's not the speaker. So I think it's, if you're in that place where you're looking for that extra motivation to carry you on, like you've had a good start and you're like, I don't know where to go next to find that or I'm tired. And I think, like we said, find those networking groups, find other entrepreneurs, listen to their stories. Even I love actually just going on YouTube and finding the stories like this one today.
Yes.
Like those are amazing, hearing how they started stories and how they kept going. And then the conferences too, finding motivational conferences. Like I heard the burning the boat story at a motivational conference one time, and that resonated and always in the back of my head. I always know I don't let myself go think about the other plan. I think ahead for future plans of like retirement and what it looks like after success and maybe selling someday and retiring, but I don't let myself think about the failure side of it. And I think you have to not dwell on that.
Yes,
space.
In fact, I think I just heard this the other day, and I really loved this saying, and I think it might have been Serena Williams, maybe, where she said, winners focus on winning and losers focus on the winners. And it's so true that when you're looking at somebody else and you're trying to mark yourself against somebody else, it's a very different story than if you just turn and keep your eye on the prize.
Oh. And I think that's what it says above our goal board is your only competition is who you were yesterday.
Yes, I
so
love
just
it.
Compete against what you did yesterday. That's why I love that her dad asking her, what did you fail at today? Because, from each failure, you do learn. And starting a business, becoming an agent, all those things, there's failures constantly along the way. It's just, do you dwell in those failures or do you move on? It's like having a bad day. You want to dwell in that bad day, that bad reaction, that bad experience, the rejection or a client being mean to you or whatever it is, or a colleague maybe. It's like if you sit there and dwell in that, then you're never moving forward to the good stuff. So
absolutely. And I think too, it's interesting. I think I was hearing something else as well about asking yourself constantly, like, who am I going to meet today that's going to help me along in my path? These things, keeping your eye on the prize, right? And then not being afraid to be open to gaining information, gather information. I think curiosity and the willingness to make mistakes. Those are sometimes, I think, just the stopping point. Like, oh, I don't know if I could do this because out of the 20 things that I might have to know, I only know 10 of them. That's okay. If you're willing to make those mistakes, you will learn. You keep a positive attitude. You take it as only a knowledge builder and help it move you forward. You're going to gain something from those. But if fear takes over, that failure means I failed, and it takes you on this spiral, it's so much harder to get back up and move forward. So I think there's a comfort of making mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get stuck in that. One thing somebody did ask me, and we'll wrap up here in a minute with this, is like, so for some folks, when I've said this to them, it's like, you can't have an out. They're like, well, I don't want to live in that desperate zone. I want to have some security. But oftentimes we use our security as a fallback to not move forward. And so I was always very financially conservative. I always wanted a prudent reserve. And they always say you should have a 6 months reserve. Now, you can't use your 6 month reserve as an excuse not to move forward. It can't be, well, I'm okay because I have 6 months of reserve. That has to be like it doesn't exist. And so for agents and maybe other small business entrepreneurs, the best thing I've found that works for them is you set up yourself a business bank account. When your commission comes in, you pay yourself a salary every month. And
so smart.
And then what is in that business bank account is in that business bank account as reserved to run your business when you miss a sale. And maybe there's another month's salary in there to pay you even if you don't have a sale. But you never pull that out. Like, you don't let it go below. You should have 6 months constantly running in there. Because for an entrepreneur, that's if you break a leg or get in a car accident or you're sick, that is like truly you can't work anymore, safety net to pay your bills. Or maybe we have a natural disaster or a pandemic. Like, those don't happen. And that's what that safety net's for. It's not there for you to take the pressure off of working for a couple months because you just didn't want to make your calls, or you just didn't want to, to do your marketing or do your networking. That is not what that's there for. But I strongly encourage you, have safety nets. But those are for true emergencies. It's not for us to not push forward and do our job. And so I know you guys hear me all the time, like, still pushing forward the growth. And I know sometimes that it gets panic inside employees, and they'll start thinking, oh, are we, financially in trouble? And I was like, no, but we're not going to get there. I'm pushing because I don't want to get to where we're financially in trouble. It's like, you have to be able to put yourself in that mindset of, I don't have any boat, and keep going, even though you might have a dinghy that you can row in to get away. But do you really want to get in that dinghy and you sit? And then what if it sinks? So like that, there is a little safety net there, but you don't want to use that, and you don't want to focus on that. And I pretend it doesn't exist.
I think
in
that's,
my mind, it doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
It's there if absolute catastrophe happens. So that'll be a fun probably episode. We'll go in a little bit more of like setting up the accounting for that. And maybe we can have a guest that would help talk a little bit about, Reader's Digest version of how you should run your money when you start out as an entrepreneur. We start sometimes just use our own bank account, but then that next step of like growing it and saving it and investing it. But this has been fun to just kind of talk through it. And I love the story you shared. So thank you for always finding great stories. And I look forward to the next one.